this is another experience that I feel encouraged to share about you, the followers. The first story was about El Charlie, an operator from the Special Forces Corps with whom I have developed a strong friendship, and to this day I consider him a brother. For this second installment, I'm sharing the story of a follower who to this day is still part of organized crime. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to say his name, where he is, or exactly which group he was from, because the point isn't to expose anyone. But he told me this story with such seriousness that honestly, it left me thinking for several days. He told me that in that world he met a guy named José, who was from Reynosa, and he described him to me in a way I'll never forget. He told me that kid was as defenseless as a damn baby, and it sounds weird to say that about someone who was involved in that world, but when he started telling me what he was like, I understood what he meant. José wasn't the typical show-off guy who went around bragging about things. He wasn't one of those guys who think they're untouchable or who always want to show off who they are. He was more quiet, kind of smiling. One of those people who sometimes even seem like they don't really understand where they're standing. He talked about simple things, about food, about music, about his ranch, about Reynosa, about things he wanted to know if one day things went well for him. One of the things he said the most was that he wanted to see the sea. He had never been to Acapulco, he had never set foot in the sand, he had never seen a real beach. He said he was curious to know what it felt like to have the water reach his feet, just like in the videos. And that really stuck with this follower because while so many people talked about money, cars, or women, José talked about wanting to step on sand. He also liked cumbias. If one played, the guy would start dancing even if he was tired. He used to say that one day he wanted to go to a Traca Tracalosa concert, buy himself a nice shirt, put on some boots, and sing like he didn't owe anyone anything. The others laughed at him, told him he was an idiot for dreaming about that, but he laughed too and said, "So what? Everyone dreams about what they want." The problem was that the place where they were wasn't meant for dreams. Everyone there ended up there for a reason. Some due to hunger, others for all kinds of reasons. Some from anger, some from bad company, and others because they'd known that life since childhood. But when you really looked at them, many didn't seem like bad men. They looked like kids trying to act grown up. This follower repeated that to me often. He told me, they're not soldiers. They're not even thugs like people imagine. They're kids. Some of them don't even have a mustache yet. Yet they treated them as if they were already machines. The training was really tough. He didn't tell me about it as something nice, not as something to brag about. He told me about it as something that breaks you. They made them get up early, tired, with their bodies aching, and from there, the orders started. Push-ups, running, carrying things, dropping to the ground, getting up, running again, dropping down again. At times, they were required to do 50 fist push-ups in under a minute, and if they failed, they had to repeat or were pushed harder. They were also asked to do pull-ups, 30 in a minute, or as many as possible. The point was that no one could say they couldn't do it anymore. If you said you couldn't do it anymore, they'd yell and ask why you came. It wasn't a normal kind of training where someone corrects you so you get better. It was about testing if you'd keep going after being broken. José struggled. He wasn't the strongest. There were days when he ended up with scraped hands, trembling arms, and a face full of dirt. But he didn't complain much. Sometimes he would just sit for a bit, take a breath, and say, "It'll pass soon." And yes, he would get up again. When they had some free time, which wasn't often, they played soccer or basketball. That's when José changed. On the court, he became a different person. If you know how to play soccer, you know that playing with 2 touches isn't easy because you don't have much time to think. You have to receive and pass quickly. Well, José could play like that. He had control, he had vision, he had that good skill with the ball. This fan told me he had magic in his feet. And he wasn't exaggerating, he said it like someone who really saw him. Sometimes after playing, they would sit down to smoke or talk. The topic of José's girlfriend came up one day. It seems that someone saw her with another guy. One of the guys said something like, "They're smoking weed, won't the boss see them?" Another replied, "Stop talking nonsense, he probably sold it to them." Everyone laughed because they'd make fun of anything there. José also laughed, but you could tell it hurt him. He didn't make a scene. He didn't even pretend to be tough. He just stayed quiet, looking at the floor, like he was swallowing his anger. Then he got up and went to kick the ball by himself. And that image really stuck with this follower, because he said that's when he understood that José was still just a kid who was hurt that his girlfriend cheated on him, who wanted to see Acapulco, who wanted to dance cumbias, but who was in a place where those things didn't matter. Time went by and things got more tense. I'm not going to go into too many details because it's not about explaining how they operated. But he did tell me that there were days when the atmosphere felt strange. Like when everyone talks less, when the bosses are more serious, when there aren't as many jokes anymore and they start moving people from one place to another. José was still there. Sometimes nervous, sometimes quiet, sometimes trying to act tough. But this follower says that even though José tried to pretend, you could see in his eyes that he still wasn't cut out for it. And one day, what happened, happened. He told me that they ran into the motorized cavalry regiment. He didn't tell me the exact place, and I don't want to say it. He just told me that everything turned into a mess very quickly. Screams, people running, people moving everywhere, orders being shouted over each other, dust, noise, fear. You don't talk about that fear because saying it would make you break down. Still, it's visible on everyone's face. In the middle of all that, José was hurt. I'm not going to say how or give details, but he was left in a situation where he couldn't move the same way anymore. This follower saw it. And that's when the part that weighs on him the most happened, because he wanted to help him. He told me that several times. He wanted to help him, but everything around was falling apart. The others were moving. Nobody wanted to stay behind. And in that situation, nobody waits for you. There's no time to carry anyone. There's no time to think about doing the nice thing. There's no time to do the right thing the way you'd want to. If you stay, you'll get left behind too. José looked at him, or so he told me. He isn't sure if he said anything or if it was just a look, since in those moments you can't process things clearly. But he says he felt as if José was asking him not to leave him, and he couldn't do anything. He had to leave, and he said that sentence with a tremendous weight. I had to leave him. He didn't say I left him, like it didn't matter. He said I had to leave him, like someone who still wants to justify himself because he knows he can't forgive himself. He told me that if he stayed, he would be left too. And I think that's what messes with his head the most, because he knows there probably wasn't another option, but that doesn't take away his guilt. Later, he found out that José never came back. And here comes one of the hardest parts of that life, because there was no funeral. There was no goodbye. There was no one to come for him the way they should have. There was no mother hugging a coffin. There were no friends saying a few words. There was none of that. There are no funerals here, he told me. They won't even come to pick you up. They won't even wait for you. Then he asked a question that truly stuck with me. How do you tell your mother they didn't wait for you? That was what hurt him most. Thinking about José's mom. Wondering if she ever truly knew what happened. Thinking that for her son was still that kid from Reynosa who someday wanted to see the sea, and not someone who would end up left behind in a story that no one would ever tell completely. This follower told me that later, when he could, he tried to say a few words for him. It wasn't really a funeral, because there was nothing formal. It was more among those who knew him, among the few who still remembered him as a person, and not just another number. He says that when it was his turn, he was speechless. What can you say about someone who left like that? He couldn't say he was a hero. He couldn't say he died for something beautiful. He couldn't make up a clean story. The only thing he could say was what was actually true, that José was from Reynosa, that he wanted to see the sea, that he liked cumbias, that he wanted to go see La Tracalosa, that he played soccer like few others, and that even though he was involved in that life, he was still a kid. He says his voice cracked when he mentioned Acapulco. That's when he realized José would never set foot on a beach. He would never put his feet in the sand. He would never go to that concert he talked about so much. He would never go back to his mother like he surely promised at some point. And that's what hurts him the most to this day. Not the adrenaline, not the noise, not the fear. What hurts him is remembering José as he was before everything ended. Laughing at any silly thing, dancing when cumbias played, playing two-touch soccer, getting serious when they talked about his girlfriend, saying that one day he was going to see the sea. José was one of those. And this follower says that sometimes when he hears a cumbia or watches videos of Acapulco, he remembers him. Not as someone in the cartel, not as someone bad. He remembers him as the kid who had simple dreams and never got to fulfill them. That's why he wanted to tell this story. Not to justify anything, not to make him look like a saint, but because, in his words, there are also people who get stuck in that life before they ever find out who they could have been. And if you have a story that weighs on you or that you've never told, maybe sharing it is a way for someone else to understand what can't be seen from the outside.